The snow fell softly on Evergreen Park, covering the benches and pathways in a blanket of white that sparkled under the strings of Christmas lights woven through the bare tree branches. The large evergreen at the center stood decorated and magnificent, its ornaments catching the glow from surrounding lamps and casting prismatic colors across the fresh snow. Families walked past bundled in winter coats, children laughing and pointing at decorations, parents holding hands and carrying shopping bags full of last-minute gifts. Their joy belonged to a different world, one Nathan Pierce could observe but no longer inhabit. He sat alone on a bench facing that tree, his expensive black cashmere overcoat dusted with snowflakes he didn't bother to brush away. His hands were clasped between his knees, shoulders hunched forward, and if someone had looked closely, they might have seen the slight tremor in his jaw, the suspicious brightness in his eyes that suggested tears he was trying hard not to shed. 43 years old, CEO of Pierce Capital Management, one of the most successful investment firms on the East Coast. Wealth most people could only dream of, a penthouse apartment overlooking Boston Harbor. By any objective measure, successful beyond imagination. Also completely, devastatingly alone. The divorce papers had been signed that morning. Catherine's lawyer had called at 9, efficient and cold. Final settlement approved by both parties. No children, so division is straightforward. Those words, no children. They'd landed like a blade between his ribs, sharp and precise, cutting through whatever composure he'd managed to maintain over the past 8 months. He'd thanked the lawyer, ended the call, and sat in his office staring at the city below until his assistant Jennifer knocked hesitantly to remind him about the afternoon meeting. He'd waved her off, claimed a headache, driven here to this park where he had no reason to be. 3 years ago, Catherine had sat across from him at their dining table, her face composed, but her hands trembling slightly around her wine glass. Nathan, I'm 35. If we want children, it has to be now. He'd looked up from the quarterly projections he'd been reviewing, irritated at the interruption. Let me close the Singapore deal first. Next year, I promise. Her face had fallen, but she'd nodded, turned away, left him to his spreadsheets. 2 years ago, the conversation had repeated with more urgency. You said next year. It's been next year for 5 years now. He'd been packing for Tokyo. After the merger. I promise. She'd stopped asking after that. Last January, she'd simply packed her bags. I'm leaving. I can't wait anymore. I want a family. He'd stood in their bedroom watching her fold clothes into suitcases, finally understanding but too late. 8 months of lawyers and paperwork and division of assets. No children to complicate things. No children at all. A little girl ran past his bench chasing a puppy, her father jogging behind, both of them laughing. Nathan watched them disappear into the falling snow and felt something crack open in his chest. He'd spent 20 years building an empire, climbing from junior analyst to CEO, acquiring companies and closing deals and earning the respect of men twice his age. He'd done everything right according to the metrics that mattered in his world. Revenue growth, market share, shareholder value. And somehow he'd missed the point entirely. Catherine hadn't left because he was a bad husband. She'd left because he wasn't a husband at all. He was a CEO who happened to share an address with her. A man who scheduled intimacy like board meetings and canceled family plans when clients called. A man who'd promised her children someday, while that someday receded further into a future that never came. Now he sat on a park bench on Christmas Eve with a phone full of business contacts and 0 personal messages. His assistant had asked this morning if he had plans for the holiday, her eyes kind and concerned. He'd lied smoothly, years of practice making deception easy. Family dinner, he'd told her. Small gathering. She'd smiled, relieved, wished him a Merry Christmas. He'd nodded and turned away before she could see his face. The truth was, he'd been invited to several parties, colleagues and business acquaintances extending obligatory invitations. The thought of making small talk while surrounded by families felt unbearable. Better to be alone. Better to sit here in this park watching strangers celebrate the holiday he no longer felt part of. He didn't realize he was crying until a small voice cut through the Christmas carols playing from speakers hidden in the trees. Mister, why are you sad? Nathan quickly wiped at his eyes and looked up to find a small boy standing a few feet away, regarding him with open curiosity and concern. The child appeared to be about 6 years old, wearing a bright red winter coat and a tan knit hat with bear ears on top. His mittened hands clutched a paper bag, and his round face was flushed from the cold. Nathan cleared his throat, tried to compose himself. "I'm fine, thank you for asking." The boy tilted his head, clearly unconvinced by this answer. "You don't look fine. You look like you're crying." Nathan managed a weak smile, years of boardroom composure failing him in front of this child. "Just something in my eye. The snow, probably." The boy considered this with the serious wisdom only children possess, then shook his head. "I don't think it's the snow. I think you're sad." He paused, then brightened with sudden inspiration. "Don't cry, mister. You can borrow my mom. She's really good at making people feel better." The statement was so unexpected, so innocently kind, that Nathan felt fresh tears threaten. This child, this stranger's child, was offering to share his mother with a grown man crying on a park bench. The gesture pierced through Nathan's carefully constructed defenses more effectively than any of Catherine's accusations or his lawyer's cold efficiency. "That's very generous of you, but I'm sure your mother is busy. You shouldn't bother her with—" "Oliver," a woman's voice called out, warm but with an edge of concern. "Oliver, what did I tell you about talking to strangers?" Nathan looked up to see a young woman hurrying toward them, her blonde hair falling loose from beneath a cream-colored winter hat. She wore a gray coat over what looked like a cream sweater and carried shopping bags in both hands, the logos from discount stores visible even from a distance. Her face was flushed from the cold, and her expression mixed concern for her son with apologetic awareness that he'd been bothering someone. Nurse scrubs were visible at her collar beneath the sweater, suggesting she'd come here straight from a shift. "I'm sorry," she reached Oliver and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, protective and firm. "I hope he wasn't bothering you. Oliver, we talked about this. You can't just walk up to people." "But Mom, he's crying," Oliver protested, pointing at Nathan with his mittened hand. "He's sad and it's Christmas Eve, and nobody should be sad on Christmas Eve." The woman's eyes met Nathan's, and he saw her expression shift as she took in his appearance, the expensive suit visible beneath his open coat, the designer watch on his wrist, the grief evident in his face despite his attempt to compose himself, the solitary figure he made on this bench while families celebrated around them. Her face softened with something Nathan recognized as compassion, though he'd grown unused to receiving it from anyone. "Oh," she said the word quietly, understanding passing across her features. Nathan stood quickly, suddenly embarrassed to be the object of this woman's pity, this stranger's concern. "It's fine, he was just being kind. Very kind, actually." He looked down at Oliver. "Thank you for your concern, young man. You have a good heart." Oliver beamed at the compliment, then held out his paper bag toward Nathan. "Do you want a cookie? Mom and I made them today. They're chocolate chip and they're really good. She always says cookies make everything a little better." Nathan found himself inexplicably touched by this gesture, by this child's instinct to offer food to someone in pain. "I couldn't take your cookies, please," Oliver insisted, shaking the bag slightly. "We made lots, and you look like you need one." The woman, Oliver's mother, smiled slightly at her son's persistence. "He's not wrong. We did make quite a few, and honestly, they are pretty good, if I do say so myself." She paused, seeming to make a decision. "Would you like to sit for a moment? We were just taking a break from our walk to look at the tree." Nathan knew he should decline politely, make some excuse about needing to be somewhere, but the truth was he had nowhere to be. His penthouse waited empty and cold. His office was closed for the holiday. Catherine was spending Christmas with her sister in Vermont, probably laughing and decorating cookies with nieces and nephews while he sat here alone. And there was something about this woman's genuine warmth, about Oliver's innocent concern, that made him want to stay even if just for a few minutes. "If you're sure I'm not intruding." "Not at all." The woman set her shopping bags down and settled onto the bench. Oliver immediately climbed up between them, positioning himself right in the middle with clear satisfaction at having orchestrated this arrangement. "I'm Nathan," he offered, accepting the cookie Oliver thrust at him. "I'm Grace," the woman said. "Grace Morrison, and this is my son Oliver. I'm 5 3/4, Oliver announced as if this was a crucial detail. Almost 6, that's a very important age. Nathan took a bite of the cookie. It was in fact delicious, still slightly warm, with the chocolate chips melted to perfection. And your mother is right, these are excellent cookies. Oliver looked pleased with this assessment. Mom's the best baker. She makes cookies for everyone. That's why we have so many today. We're taking them to Mr. Peterson and Mrs. Chen and the Rodriguezes because they're our neighbors and friends. That's very thoughtful, Nathan said, glancing at Grace. She smiled a bit self-consciously, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. It's just a small tradition we have. Everyone's been so kind to us since we moved here, and I like to do something to show appreciation. She paused, then added, plus Oliver loves helping me bake, so it works out well. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the snowfall and the families passing by. Nathan felt himself relaxing slightly, the crushing loneliness easing just a fraction in the presence of this kind woman and her talkative son. The cookie was warm in his hand and tasted like childhood, like holidays he barely remembered from before his father's business had consumed their family's attention. So, Grace said gently, not looking at him directly, but rather at the tree ahead, do you have plans for Christmas? Nathan considered lying again, spinning another fiction about family dinners and gatherings. But something about Grace's tone, curious rather than pitying, genuinely interested rather than obligatory, made him tell the truth. No plans. That's sad, Oliver declared with his characteristic directness. Everyone should have plans for Christmas. Mom and I are going to open presents in the morning, and then we're going to have pancakes shaped like snowmen, and then we're going to watch movies all day in our pajamas. That sounds like a perfect Christmas, Nathan said and meant it. The simplicity of it, the warmth felt more appealing than any expensive restaurant reservation or exclusive party invitation. You could come, Oliver suggested brightly, turning to look up at Nathan with wide, hopeful eyes. Right, Mom? He could come have snowman pancakes with us. Oliver, Grace started, clearly embarrassed by her son's impulsive invitation. It's all right, Nathan said quickly. That's very kind, Oliver. But I'm sure your mother has her day planned, and I wouldn't want to impose. You wouldn't be imposing. Grace interrupted, then seemed surprised at herself. She looked at Nathan directly, and he saw in her eyes the same genuine warmth that her son possessed. I'm serious. If you really don't have plans, if you'd really be spending the day alone, well, we'd be happy to have you join us. It's nothing fancy, just pancakes and movies and probably Oliver's showing you every single toy he owns. But you'd be welcome. Nathan stared at her, not quite believing what he was hearing. This woman, this stranger he'd met 10 minutes ago, was inviting him into her home for Christmas. You don't even know me. I know you're sitting alone in a park on Christmas Eve looking like your heart is broken, Grace said softly. And I know my son thinks you need someone to be kind to you, and his instincts about people are usually pretty good. She smiled. Besides, it's Christmas. If you can't show kindness to strangers at Christmas, when can you? Nathan felt something crack open in his chest, some defensive wall he'd been maintaining for months or maybe years. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Oliver urged. Please, I never have anyone to play with on Christmas except Mom, and she's not very good at dinosaurs. I'm terrible at dinosaurs, Grace confirmed with a laugh. I can never remember which ones are herbivores and which are carnivores, and apparently that's very important. It's really important, Oliver said seriously. Nathan found himself laughing, actually laughing, for what felt like the first time in weeks. I happen to know quite a bit about dinosaurs. I had a pretty extensive collection when I was your age. Oliver's face lit up like the Christmas tree behind them. Really? Do you know about the Spinosaurus? The Spinosaurus was one of my favorites, Nathan said. Did you know it's one of the few dinosaurs we think actually spent time in the water? As Oliver launched into an enthusiastic discussion about aquatic dinosaurs, Nathan caught Grace's eye over her son's head. She was smiling at him with such warmth and approval that he felt something shift in his chest. When was the last time someone had looked at him like that? Not with professional respect or polite courtesy, but with genuine human kindness. Not since Catherine had stopped looking at him altogether, her eyes sliding past him in their apartment like he was furniture to navigate around. They stayed on that bench for nearly half an hour, talking about dinosaurs and Christmas traditions and the best kind of cookies. Nathan learned that Grace was a nurse at the Children's Hospital downtown, that she and Oliver had moved to this neighborhood 2 years ago after her divorce, that she worked long shifts but always made sure she was home for the important moments in her son's life. It's not always easy, Grace admitted, her breath visible in the cold air. Being a single parent, managing work and childcare and everything else. Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water. But then Oliver does something sweet or funny or impossibly kind, like offering cookies to sad strangers in parks. And I remember that we're doing okay. Maybe more than okay. He's a wonderful kid, Nathan said honestly. You should be very proud. I am, Grace said softly. He's my whole world. Nathan thought about his own life, about the empire he'd built at the expense of everything else. What did he have to show for all those long hours, all that success? Money, certainly. Professional respect, accolades, a corner office with a view. But no one to share it with. No child to call him dad. No one whose whole world he was. The realization settled over him like the falling snow, cold and inescapable. I should let you get back to your deliveries, Nathan said, though he found himself reluctant to leave this bubble of warmth they'd created. About that, Grace said, and there was something hesitant in her voice, as if she was mustering courage. I meant what I said earlier about Christmas tomorrow. The invitation is genuine if you'd like to join us. We live just a few blocks from here on Maple Street, the blue house with the white shutters. If you find yourself alone tomorrow and you'd like some company, well, we'll be there probably still in our pajamas at noon. She pulled out a pen and a scrap of paper from her bag, writing down her address. No pressure at all, but the offer stands. Nathan took the paper, his fingers brushing hers briefly as he did. The contact sent a small shock through him, awareness of her as more than just a kind stranger. Thank you. His voice came out thick with emotion. You have no idea what this means to me. I think I do, Grace said gently. I've had lonely Christmases too. I know what it's like. Oliver, who'd been examining his remaining cookies with serious concentration, looked up at Nathan. You'll come, right? You promised to tell me more about the Spinosaurus. I didn't exactly promise. Nathan started, but Oliver's hopeful expression stopped him. But yes, I'd love to tell you more about the Spinosaurus. They said their goodbyes and Nathan watched Grace and Oliver walk away through the falling snow. Oliver turned back once to wave enthusiastically, and Nathan raised his hand in return, then looked down at the paper in his hand with Grace's address written in neat handwriting. He stood there for a long time after they disappeared from view, snowflakes gathering on his shoulders and in his hair, looking at that address and thinking about the unexpected kindness of strangers, about a little boy who'd seen a sad man and decided to help, about a woman who'd extended genuine warmth without knowing anything about who Nathan was, or what he did, or how much money he had. For the first time in months, Nathan felt something other than grief and loneliness. He felt hope. Small and tentative, yes, but real. That night in his enormous empty penthouse, Nathan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Grace and Oliver, about their modest Christmas plans, about the warmth and authenticity of their brief encounter. He thought about how Oliver had offered his cookies without hesitation, how Grace had invited a complete stranger to Christmas without knowing his name or his background. The contrast to his own world felt stark. In Nathan's world, people researched each other before meetings, checked credentials and bank accounts, calculated the value of every interaction. Oliver had simply seen someone in pain and offered help. Grace had seen someone alone and offered company. No calculation, no agenda, just kindness. He thought about Catherine's words from months ago, spoken in their lawyer's office during one of their final meetings. You've built this incredible career, Nathan, but you forgot to build a life. She'd been right. He'd forgotten what mattered. Or maybe he'd never really known. Success had always been measured in dollars and deals, in titles and territories conquered. No one had taught him that the truest measure was something else entirely, something he couldn't quantify on a spreadsheet. At some point in the early hours of Christmas morning, Nathan made a decision. He got out of bed and began making calls, pulling strings, using resources. His assistant Jennifer answered on the third ring, her voice groggy. Mr. Pierce, is everything all right? I need your help with something unusual, Nathan said. I need you to do some shopping for me first thing in the morning. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, then her voice came back clearer, alert. Of course, what do you need? Nathan explained. Ingredients for snowman pancakes. She'd need to find a recipe online. Hot chocolate mix, the good kind, not the cheap powder. A selection of Christmas movies, family-friendly, and a toy, specifically a Spinosaurus dinosaur figure, the largest and most detailed one she could find. A Spinosaurus? Jennifer repeated, and Nathan could hear the smile in her voice. It's important, Nathan said. The best quality available. Price doesn't matter. I'll have everything ready by 9 a.m., Jennifer said. Mr. Pierce? This is good. Whatever this is, it's good. Thank you, Jennifer. And Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Mr. Pierce. Nathan hung up and looked at the clock. 3:37 a.m. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been awake at this hour for anything other than international conference calls. Couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this nervous about something that wasn't a board meeting or acquisition negotiation. He was 43 years old, a man who'd built a fortune through calculated risk and strategic thinking, and he was terrified of showing up at a stranger's house for pancakes. He showered and dressed carefully, choosing jeans instead of his usual pressed slacks, a simple sweater instead of the button-downs and ties that lived in his closet. The casual clothes felt foreign, costume-like, but also strangely liberating. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw someone different from the CEO who inhabited this penthouse. Someone younger maybe, or just less burdened. He thought about backing out, about texting Grace some excuse, but then he thought about Oliver's face lighting up when he talked about dinosaurs, about Grace's gentle offer of kindness, about spending another Christmas alone in this empty apartment. No, he was going. At 9 a.m. sharp, Jennifer arrived at his building with multiple shopping bags. She'd found a 24-hour grocery store that had opened early for last-minute shoppers, had located a specialty toy store that kept unusual hours during the holidays. The Spinosaurus was magnificent, nearly 2 feet long, with accurate coloring and detailed features. It must have cost $200 at least. Nathan didn't care. He loaded everything into his car and sat for a moment in the driver's seat, hands on the steering wheel, heart pounding. This was insane. He was showing up at a woman's house with expensive gifts, inserting himself into their Christmas, probably making everything awkward and uncomfortable. He should turn around. He should go home. He started the car and drove toward Maple Street. Grace's house was exactly as she described. A modest blue structure with white shutters and a small front porch decorated with a simple wreath. The neighborhood was working class. The houses close together, cars parked on streets because the driveways were too small. Nathan's Tesla looked conspicuous and out of place. He almost turned around then, imagining what Grace would think when she saw his car, when she realized exactly how different their worlds were. But then the front door opened and Oliver appeared in dinosaur print pajamas, his face breaking into a huge smile when he saw who it was. Mom, he came. The sad Meister came. Grace appeared behind her son, also in pajamas, simple flannel pants and a soft-looking sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail and her face was free of makeup. Nathan thought she looked absolutely beautiful, more real and present than anyone he had encountered in months of polished business dinners and carefully curated social events. You came, she said, and the surprise and genuine pleasure in her voice made Nathan's decision feel right. I hope I'm not too early. Nathan climbed out of his car and gathered the shopping bags. And I hope you don't mind, but I brought a few things. He held up the bags. I have ingredients for snowman pancakes. I called my assistant this morning and she tracked down a recipe. I have hot chocolate mix, the good kind. I have a selection of Christmas movies because I wasn't sure what you liked. And he pulled out one more bag with a sheepish expression. I have a Spinosaurus toy because I thought Oliver might like it. Oliver's eyes went wide as Nathan crouched down to his level and pulled out the large dinosaur figure. A Spinosaurus? A real one? A toy one, Nathan clarified, but a pretty accurate one. See, it has the sail on its back and the crocodile-like snout. Oliver took the toy with reverent care, his face showing pure joy. This is the best present ever. Oliver, what do you say? Grace prompted gently. Thank you, Mr. Nathan. Oliver threw his arms around Nathan's neck in an enthusiastic hug. Nathan closed his eyes, hugging the child back, feeling something shift and settle in his chest. When was the last time someone had hugged him like this, with such unguarded affection and gratitude? Catherine had stopped touching him months before she left, her body language clearly communicating what her words hadn't yet said. His business associates offered firm handshakes and professional back pats. This child's embrace felt like coming home to something he'd never actually had. You really didn't have to do all this, Grace said as she ushered him inside. The house was small but cozy, decorated with a modest Christmas tree and handmade ornaments. It was warm and lived in and felt more like home than Nathan's penthouse ever had. I wanted to, Nathan said honestly. You invited me into your Christmas when you had no reason to. The least I could do was contribute. As Grace made coffee and Nathan helped Oliver set up an elaborate dinosaur scenario in the living room, Nathan found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. There was no pressure to perform here. No need to be the successful CEO or the polished professional. He was just Nathan playing dinosaurs with a 6-year-old and helping a kind woman make pancakes. The roles felt more real than anything in his actual life. The pancakes were a disaster at first. Nathan's initial attempt at creating a snowman shape resulted in what Grace generously called an abstract interpretation. It looks like a blob with a carrot, Oliver declared with brutal honesty. It does look like a blob with a carrot, Nathan agreed, laughing. I may have overstated my cooking abilities here. Here. Grace moved to stand beside him at the stove. You have to make 3 circles of batter, different sizes. The trick is getting them close enough to connect, but not so close they become one big pancake. She guided his hand with hers, helping him pour the batter in the right pattern. Nathan was acutely aware of her proximity, of the light scent of her shampoo, of the warmth of her hand over his. There, she said as a recognizable snowman shape took form in the pan. See, you've got it. Their eyes met, and Nathan saw something flicker in her expression. Awareness, maybe, or possibility. She stepped back quickly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks, and turned to check on Oliver's progress with his own pancake creation. They spent the morning exactly as Oliver had described, snowman pancakes for breakfast, though half of them still looked more like abstract blobs than proper snowmen, hot chocolate with marshmallows, Christmas movies playing on the small television while Oliver demonstrated every toy he owned and created elaborate stories with Nathan's participation. It was simple, it was ordinary, it was perfect. Nathan had been there for perhaps 3 hours, just settling into the comfortable rhythm of their Christmas morning when the doorbell rang. Grace tensed immediately, her body language shifting from relaxed to alert in an instant. She glanced at Nathan, something like fear crossing her face, then moved toward the door. Oliver, stay here with Mr. Nathan. Nathan stood, some instinct telling him something was wrong. Grace opened the door and a man stood on the porch, mid-30s, wearing jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, his hair uncombed and his eyes bloodshot. Nathan could smell the alcohol from across the room. Grace, where's my son? The man's voice was aggressive, demanding. Michael, you need to leave. Grace blocked the doorway with her body, her voice firm despite the slight tremor Nathan could detect. Michael saw Nathan through the open door and his expression darkened. Who the fuck is that? Oliver ran to Grace, wrapping his arms around her leg. Mommy? That's none of your business, Grace said. You haven't seen Oliver in 6 months. You don't get to show up drunk on Christmas. Drunk? I'm not drunk. I came to see my son and I find you shacked up with some rich asshole. Michael pushed forward and Nathan moved instinctively, positioning himself between Michael and Grace. I think the lady asked you to leave. Nathan kept his voice calm, controlled, the same tone he used in hostile boardroom negotiations. Oh, you got yourself a rich boyfriend, Grace? Michael laughed, mean and bitter. That didn't take long. 2 years and you're already whoring yourself out? That's enough. Nathan stepped fully into the doorway. You're drunk and you're scaring your son. Leave now or I'm calling the police. I have rights, Michael said, but his aggression was wavering, confronted by someone his own size. He's my son. You signed away custody. Grace's voice shook but held steady. You said you didn't want the responsibility. You can't just show up now. Michael's face twisted with anger. I'm gonna get a lawyer, take you back to court, especially now that you're letting strangers around my kid. He jabbed a finger toward Nathan. They're gonna hear about this. He turned and stumbled down the porch steps, nearly falling, then recovered and walked unsteadily toward a rusted sedan parked on the street. Nathan watched until the car pulled away, weaving slightly, then turned back to find Grace crying and Oliver clinging to her, tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry. Grace's voice broke. You should go. This was a mistake. What? No, Nathan started. Please. This was a mistake. She picked up Oliver, holding him close, and Nathan saw the fear in her eyes, the shame, the desperate need to protect her child from whatever judgment might be coming. Oliver was crying too, reaching toward Nathan over his mother's shoulder. No, Mom, I want Mr. Nathan to stay. Baby, we can't. Grace's tears fell freely now. We just can't. Nathan stood in the small living room, surrounded by half-eaten pancakes and Christmas movies still playing on the television and the Spinosaurus toy lying abandoned on the floor. He thought about leaving, about making this easier for Grace by walking away, about returning to his penthouse and his empty life and pretending this morning had never happened. He thought about Catherine's words, "You forgot to build a life." He thought about Oliver's voice in the park. Don't cry, mister. You can borrow my mom. Grace, Nathan said quietly, look at me. She did, her face streaked with tears, her son trembling in her arms. I'm not going anywhere, Nathan said. Not unless you really want me to. But if you're sending me away because you're scared of him, because you think I'll judge you, or this will be too complicated, or you have to protect me somehow, don't. His voice was firm, certain, more certain than he'd been about anything in years. I won't let him hurt you or Oliver. You don't understand, Grace said. He'll use you. He'll tell the courts I'm being irresponsible, bringing strangers around Oliver. He'll say I'm chasing money instead of focusing on my son. Let him try. Nathan moved closer. Let him say whatever he wants. The truth is I'm a stranger who you showed kindness to on Christmas Eve, who you invited to pancakes, who played dinosaurs with your son. There's nothing wrong with any of that. Oliver lifted his head from Grace's shoulder, his small voice cutting through the tension. Please don't leave, Mr. Nathan. Please. Nathan looked at this child, at this woman, at the small, brave family they'd made in the wreckage of their broken marriages and lost dreams. He thought about how far he'd fallen from where he'd started, from the young man who'd once believed success meant something more than money. He thought about Catherine and the children they'd never had, and the 20 years he'd spent climbing a ladder that led nowhere he actually wanted to be. And he made a choice. I'm staying, Nathan said, if you'll have me. Grace lowered Oliver back to the floor slowly, her son's tears still wet on her cheeks. The living room felt smaller suddenly, the Christmas decorations garish instead of festive, the half-finished pancakes congealing on plates scattered across the coffee table. Nathan stood near the doorway, his expensive jeans and designer sweater suddenly screaming the wealth disparity he'd tried to downplay. Michael's car had disappeared down the street, but his presence lingered like smoke, tainting everything. We should still eat. Nathan moved toward the kitchen with careful deliberacy. Those pancakes aren't going to finish themselves, and I believe someone promised me a master class in proper snowman construction technique. Oliver wiped his nose with the back of his hand, looking between his mother and Nathan with the wariness of a child who'd learned too young that adults left. You're really staying? I'm really staying. Nathan crouched to Oliver's eye level again. That was scary, wasn't it? What just happened? Oliver nodded, fresh tears threatening. Want to know a secret? I was scared too. Big adults can be scary when they're angry, but your mom protected you. She was very brave. Oliver turned to look at Grace with something like awe, as if seeing her differently. You weren't scared, Mommy? Grace knelt beside them both, her hands shaking as she cupped Oliver's face. I was terrified, baby, but being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing anyway. Nathan watched this exchange and felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of courage. 20 years of high-stakes negotiations, and he'd never once felt the kind of fear he'd seen in Grace's eyes when Michael appeared. The fear that someone might take your child. The fear that your past would destroy your present. That was real terror, and she'd faced it with nothing but her own body as a shield. They returned to the kitchen with Oliver between them, a small delegation reassembling after a battle. Nathan took over pancake duty while Grace made fresh coffee, her hands steadier now, but still trembling slightly when she thought no one was watching. Oliver sat on the counter swinging his legs, narrating a story about how the Spinosaurus defeated evil dinosaurs who tried to hurt baby dinosaurs, the metaphor so transparent it made Nathan's chest ache. The pancakes improved with practice. Nathan's snowmen actually resembled their namesakes by the fourth attempt. 3 distinct circles stacked precariously and connected with strategic batter placement. Oliver decorated them with chocolate chip eyes and carrot noses, his earlier distress fading as concentration took over. Grace moved around the kitchen with efficient grace, her nurse training evident in how she multitasked, managing coffee and cleanup, and keeping Oliver engaged simultaneously. "These are perfect," Oliver announced when they finally sat down to eat the successful batch. "Mr. Nathan, you learned really fast. I had an excellent teacher." Nathan caught Grace's eye and she smiled. A real smile this time, not the terrified grimace from earlier. They settled on the couch after breakfast, Oliver wedged between the adults with a pile of dinosaurs and his new Spinosaurus, taking pride of place. The television played a claymation Christmas special, but none of them really watched it. Oliver demonstrated how the Spinosaurus could swim, making elaborate sound effects, while Nathan and Grace talked over his head in the careful way adults do when they're having 2 conversations simultaneously. "I should explain about Michael." Grace's voice stayed light, but Nathan heard the steel underneath. "You don't owe me explanations." "I think I do." She glanced down at Oliver, who was fully absorbed in his play. "We met when I was 23, married at 24. He seemed wonderful at first, you know? Charming, attentive. Then it changed. Slowly, then all at once. Her fingers traced patterns on the couch cushion. He needed to know where I was every minute, who I talked to, what I spent money on. By the time I realized what was happening, I was pregnant and completely isolated." Nathan's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet, letting her tell it her way. "The first time he hit me, I was 6 months along." Grace's voice stayed steady, clinical almost, the way people describe trauma when they've processed it enough to talk without breaking. "I left the next day, stayed with a shelter for 3 months, filed for divorce when Oliver was born. Michael contested it, said he wanted to be a father, but when the judge granted me custody, he just stopped showing up. Signed away his rights because he said he couldn't afford child support anyway. And now he's back. Now he's back." Grace looked at Nathan directly. "He saw you, your car, your clothes. Michael might be a lot of things, but he's not stupid. He knows money when he sees it. He'll find a lawyer, probably convince his parents to help pay for it. They always thought I wasn't good enough for him anyway." Oliver fell asleep between them around noon, sprawled across both their laps with dinosaurs clutched in his hands. Grace stroked her son's hair absently, her other hand inches from where Nathan's rested on the couch cushion. The silence felt heavy with things unsaid, questions forming and reforming without sound. "Can I ask what you do?" Grace's voice was barely above a whisper, careful not to wake Oliver. "You said investment work yesterday." Nathan hesitated. This was the moment where he could continue the half-truth, let her believe he was some mid-level analyst with a good salary and designer taste. But Michael had already seen enough to draw conclusions, and lying to Grace felt wrong in a way lying to business contacts never had. "I run an investment firm. What's it called?" The words felt like stones in his mouth. "Pierce Capital Management." Grace went very still. Her hand stopped moving through Oliver's hair. She carefully extracted herself from beneath her son, laying him gently on the couch with a pillow under his head, then turned to Nathan with her phone already out. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, typing, waiting, then reading. Nathan watched her face change as she scrolled, watched understanding and then shock and then something like betrayal cross her features. "Pierce Capital? As in the Pierce Capital?" Her voice was tight, controlled in the way people sound when they're trying not to scream. "You're Nathan Pierce, the CEO, net worth estimated at $300 million. It's not quite that much." Nathan started, then realized how absurd that sounded. "Why didn't you tell me?" Grace stood abruptly, pacing the small living room. "I Googled Nathan Investment Boston. I didn't think to search your full name because who just meets a billionaire in a park? I didn't think it mattered. Didn't matter? Grace whirled to face him, her voice rising before she caught herself and glanced at Oliver's sleeping form. Michael is going to use this. He'll tell the courts I'm a gold digger, that I'm chasing rich men instead of taking care of my son, that I let a stranger around Oliver because of money. That's insane. We just met yesterday. Judges don't care about timelines, Nathan. They care about optics. A struggling single mother and a billionaire showing up on Christmas? Grace laughed, a bitter sound. Do you know what this looks like? What he'll make it look like? Nathan stood too, the gulf between them suddenly vast despite the small room. I wasn't trying to deceive you, but you did. You let me think. She gestured helplessly at his casual clothes, at the modest gifts he'd brought that now felt obscenely calculated. You dressed down, brought homemade pancake ingredients like you were just some regular guy. But you're not, are you? You're Nathan Pierce, who probably has staff to tie his shoes in a car that costs more than my house. I just wanted. Nathan's voice cracked slightly. I wanted to be regular. Just for one day. Just Nathan. Not the CEO. Not the guy everyone wants something from. Well, congratulations. Now you've made everything worse. Grace wrapped her arms around herself. Michael will petition for custody. He'll use you as evidence. And I'll lose Oliver because I made the mistake of showing kindness to a sad stranger. You won't lose Oliver. You don't know that. You don't know what it's like to fight for your child when you have nothing and they have everything. Grace's tears came again, angry this time. You should go. It was a mistake. All of it, Mom. Oliver's sleepy voice cut through the tension. Why are you yelling? Grace moved immediately to her son, scooping him up even though he was getting too big to carry easily. We're not yelling, baby. Everything's fine. Is Mr. Nathan leaving? Oliver looked over Grace's shoulder at Nathan with eyes that had seen too many people walk away. Nathan met those eyes and saw his own childhood reflected back, the one he rarely let himself remember. The father who was never home, the mother who stopped fighting for attention, the loneliness of being raised by staff in a house full of empty rooms. I need to go for now. But this isn't goodbye, okay, buddy? Promise? Oliver's voice was very small. Nathan looked at Grace, saw her face closed and protective, saw the walls slamming back into place. He couldn't promise. Not if Grace didn't want him here. Not if his presence would hurt them more than help. I'll try very hard to keep seeing you. How's that? Oliver nodded, but his lip trembled. Nathan gathered his coat and the shopping bags he'd brought, leaving the Spinosaurus on the coffee table. Grace didn't look at him as he moved toward the door. At the threshold, he paused. For what it's worth, I meant everything I said. About helping, about staying. If you change your mind, you have my number. She didn't respond. Nathan closed the door softly behind him and stood on the porch, breathing cold air that felt like glass in his lungs. His Tesla sat on the street looking exactly as obscene and out of place as Grace had said. He'd wanted to be regular. He'd wanted one day where money didn't matter and people saw him instead of his bank account. Instead, he'd made everything infinitely worse for the first people in years who'd made him feel human. The next week passed in a blur of work Nathan threw himself into with manic intensity. Patrick noticed immediately when Nathan showed up at the office December 26th, unscheduled, working through reports that could have waited until January. You're back to your old self. The COO's tone suggested this wasn't a compliment. Is that bad? You seemed happier last week. Patrick set coffee on Nathan's desk, uninvited and unwanted. Whatever happened on Christmas, maybe it was good for you. It was a mistake. Nathan didn't look up from his screen. People got hurt. Better to focus on what I'm actually good at. Making money. But the work felt hollow in ways it hadn't before Christmas. The spreadsheets and projections that used to absorb his attention for hours now seemed like elaborate games, points scored in competitions that meant nothing. He couldn't stop thinking about Oliver's small arms around his neck, Grace's hands guiding his on the spatula, the feeling of being part of something real, even briefly. He checked his phone obsessively, hoping for a text from Grace. None came. Oliver asked about you today. Grace's message arrived on December 30th, 6 days of silence broken with 7 words that made Nathan's heart stop. He stared at the screen in his office. the night dark outside his windows and the building empty around him. Patrick had gone home hours ago. Jennifer had left, reminding him to get some sleep. Nathan had stayed because his penthouse felt even emptier than usual after experiencing what home could actually feel like. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for 10 minutes before he managed a response. "How is he?" The three dots indicating Grace was typing appeared and disappeared 4 times before her message came through. "Confused, sad, asking why you left. I told him it was complicated, but he's 6. He doesn't understand complicated. Can I see him?" Nathan sent before he could second guess. The dots appeared again, stayed longer. "Michael filed paperwork today. Petition to modify custody. His lawyer sent a letter. They're using you as evidence of poor judgment on my part. My lawyer says any contact right now makes it worse." Nathan read the words 3 times, each repetition landing like a fist. "I'm sorry, I never meant..." "I know." Grace's response came quickly. "I know you didn't, but intention doesn't change outcome. We need space right now. I need to focus on keeping my son." The conversation ended there. Nathan sat in his office until dawn broke over Boston Harbor, the sunrise beautiful and meaningless, turning the sky colors that didn't matter without anyone to share them with. New Year's Eve found him still at the office, pretending to work while the city celebrated below. Patrick had invited him to a party. Jennifer had sent a text hoping he was with his new friends. He was with spreadsheets and silence, which felt appropriate. Catherine was probably in Vermont toasting with champagne, relieved to be free of a husband who'd never been present anyway. Grace was probably home with Oliver, protecting what remained of their small family from the damage Nathan had caused. And Nathan was here, 43 years old, and finally understanding that some mistakes couldn't be fixed by money or influence or clever negotiation. Some things, once broken, stayed broken. The chest pain started on January 2nd. Nathan woke at 3 in the morning with pressure radiating from his sternum down his left arm, his breath coming short and sharp. He lay in the dark telling himself it was nothing, stress maybe, too many late nights and skipped meals. By January 3rd, the pain had intensified enough that driving seemed unwise. But he drove anyway, one hand on the wheel and the other pressed against his ribs, like he could hold himself together through pressure alone. The emergency room at Boston General was surprisingly busy for a Thursday morning. Nathan checked in at triage, gave his symptoms to a nurse who looked at him sharply and said, "Sit down immediately." He sat. The waiting room television played morning news, something about traffic and weather. A child cried somewhere behind a curtain. Nathan focused on breathing, on not thinking about heart attacks, immortality, and dying alone in a hospital without anyone to call. "Mr. Pierce?" A voice he recognized cut through the ambient noise. Nathan looked up and saw Grace standing there in scrubs, her hair pulled back severely and her face professional until their eyes met and shock replaced composure. "Nathan, what are you doing here?" "I'm fine." His voice came out weaker than intended. "Just some chest pain? Probably nothing." "How long have you had symptoms?" Grace was already moving into nurse mode, checking the chart the triage nurse had started, reading vitals that apparently weren't good based on her expression. 3 days. 3 days. And you waited?" Grace's professional mask cracked. "Nathan, do you have family history of cardiac issues?" He tried to answer, but the question itself felt like accusation. No family, no history to know about. Parents who died in a car accident when he was 25, before he'd thought to ask about medical backgrounds. No siblings, no children to inherit whatever genetic time bombs he carried. "I don't know, come with me." Grace led him to an examination room, pulled the curtain with practiced efficiency. "Lie down. I'm ordering an EKG and blood work." Nathan obeyed, too tired to argue, watching Grace work with the competence of someone who did this hundreds of times. She attached electrodes to his chest without meeting his eyes, her touch professional and impersonal in ways her hands hadn't been when guiding his on the spatula. The machine hummed and beeped and produced a printout Grace studied with furrowed concentration. When she finished the examination and the doctor had been called and tests had been ordered, Grace closed the curtain fully and turned to him. "It's not a heart attack." Her voice was quiet. "You're having a panic attack, anxiety-induced chest pain. The doctor will confirm, but I'm confident in the diagnosis." Nathan stared at the ceiling, at the fluorescent lights and water-stained tiles. "That's not possible. I don't get panic attacks. Everyone gets panic attacks under enough stress. Grace pulled a chair close to the examination table, close enough he could see the dark circles under her eyes. What happened, Nathan? Why are you falling apart? The question was too direct, too honest for the thin walls and clinical setting. Nathan closed his eyes. I ruined your Christmas. I complicated your custody situation. I made everything worse, and I can't fix it. His voice broke on the last words. I can't fix it, and that's all I know how to do. Fix things, buy solutions, make problems go away with money and influence. But I can't buy back Oliver's trust or your safety or undo Michael knowing about me. Grace was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried something Nathan hadn't heard before. Exhaustion, maybe, or resignation. Oliver asks about you every single day. 3 times this morning he wanted to know if you'd come back. I told him no. I told him you were busy with your important life. He cried for 20 minutes. Nathan's eyes burned. I'm so sorry. The doctor came then, breaking the moment, confirming Grace's diagnosis with additional tests and prescriptions. Anxiety, not cardiac. Severe stress response. Recommendations for therapy and medication and lifestyle changes Nathan barely heard, and barely a two. When the doctor left, Grace stayed, perched on that chair like a bird ready to fly. Michael's hearing is January 20th. Her words came out rushed, like she'd been holding them back. 2 weeks from now. My lawyer is court-appointed, overworked, probably won't prepare adequately. Michael's lawyer is expensive and aggressive. They're building a case that I'm unstable, that I prioritize potential relationships over Oliver's well-being, that I let a billionaire I barely know around my vulnerable child. I'll testify. Nathan sat up despite the electrodes still attached to his chest. As a character witness, I'll explain exactly what happened, how you showed kindness to a stranger, how responsible you were, how much you love Oliver. That will make it worse, don't you see? Grace's composure finally cracked completely. You showing up to defend me just proves their point, that I'm involved with you, that this is a relationship, that I'm being influenced by money. Then what? Nathan's voice rose. I just disappear? Pretend Christmas never happened? Let Michael take Oliver because I dared to care about you both? I don't know. Grace pressed her hands to her face. I don't know the right answer. All I know is every choice feels wrong and I'm terrified of losing my son. The curtain opened and a nurse appeared, apologetic. Ms. Morrison, your shift ended an hour ago. They need you to clock out or authorize overtime. Grace stood mechanically. I have to go. She looked at Nathan one more time, her face full of something that looked like goodbye. Take care of yourself. Please, wait. Nathan pulled electrodes off his chest, not caring about protocol. Grace, please, let me help. I'll stay away until after the hearing, if that's what you need. But let me get you a real lawyer, someone who can actually defend you. With what money? Your money? Grace laughed without humor. That's exactly what Michael's team wants. Evidence that you're buying me, influencing me, taking advantage of a vulnerable woman. Nathan had no answer for that. Every solution his money could provide was also ammunition for Michael. Every way he might help was another weapon against Grace. She was right. His presence in her life was poison, no matter how much he wanted to stay. Grace left, and Nathan sat alone in the examination room until the nurse returned with discharge papers and instructions. Anti-anxiety medication. Follow up with primary care. Reduce stress. The instructions felt like jokes. How did you reduce stress when you'd found the first real thing in your empty life and destroyed it through proximity? But Patrick had other concerns when Nathan returned to the office January 5th. The board wants an emergency meeting. The COO dropped the news without preamble. Richard's been gathering votes, claims you're unfit to lead. On what grounds? On the grounds that you've missed meetings, you're distracted, and you're making headlines. Patrick showed Nathan his phone. The tabloid site displayed a photo, grainy but recognizable. Nathan's Tesla parked on Grace's street Christmas morning. The headline read, Billionaire CEO's Secret Christmas Romance. Where was your investigator? I wasn't hiding. Nathan studied the photo with detached interest. Someone from Grace's neighborhood must have recognized the car, done basic research, sold the story. No law against spending Christmas with friends. The board doesn't care about laws. They care about judgment. Richard's arguing your personal life is affecting your professional performance. Patrick paused. Is it true? About the woman and her kid? Nathan met his oldest colleague's eyes. Yes. Are you in love with her? The question landed like artillery, unexpected and devastating. Nathan hadn't let himself think in those terms. Love felt too large, too fast, too impossible after knowing someone 3 days total. But then he thought about Grace's hands on his, teaching him patience through pancakes. Oliver's arms around his neck, trusting so completely. The way Christmas morning had felt like coming home to a place he'd never been. Yes, his voice came out steady. I think I am. Then fix it. Patrick's advice was simple. Not the board situation. That's just work. We can handle Richard. Fix whatever's broken with her. Because I've known you 20 years and I've never once heard you say you love anyone. Not even Catherine. If you let this woman go, you're an idiot. The board meeting was scheduled for January 10th. Grace's custody hearing for January 20th. Nathan had 10 days to save his company and 10 more to potentially save Grace from a fight she couldn't win alone. He spent both periods working with an intensity that frightened even Patrick. Closed 2 major accounts, restructured the Japan division remotely, returned every call and attended every meeting and showed Richard and the board exactly why he'd been named CEO in the first place. But at night in his penthouse, he researched family law, custody battles, anxiety medication, and how to help someone who didn't want help from you. On January 19th, the night before the hearing, Nathan sat in his office looking at Grace's address on that wrinkled napkin he'd kept in his wallet. He drafted and deleted 17 text messages. None of them said what needed saying. None of them could bridge the gap between wanting to help and knowing his help hurt. Finally, he sent just 3 words. I'll be there. The response came back immediately. You'll make it worse. Nathan typed, please, let me do this one thing right. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared 6 times before Grace's response arrived. Michael's hearing is at 2 p.m., courthouse downtown. If you testify, if you make this about us, I'll never forgive you. Nathan read the message 20 times, trying to decode permission from warning. She'd given him the time and location. She'd acknowledged he might testify. The never forgive you felt less like prohibition and more like please don't hurt me again. He sent back, I understand. That night, Nathan couldn't sleep. He paced his penthouse thinking about tomorrow, about what testimony might help versus hurt, about the impossible position of caring for someone whose life you'd accidentally detonated. At 3 a.m., his phone rang. Grace's number. Nathan answered before the second ring. Grace? Her breathing came through ragged, panicked. I can't do this. I can't walk into that courthouse tomorrow and watch Michael try to take Oliver. I can't lose him, Nathan. I can't. You won't. Nathan pressed the phone tight against his ear, like proximity to her voice mattered. You're an incredible mother. The judge will see that. What if they don't? What if they just see a struggling single mom who can barely pay rent and works too many hours? What if Michael looks stable because his parents give him money and he's got a fiancée now? Did I mention that? He's engaged to a teacher, someone wholesome and traditional, while I'm just... Grace's voice broke into sobs. You're just raising your son alone and working yourself to exhaustion and studying for a degree while managing an ex-husband who terrorizes you. Nathan kept his voice gentle. You're just the bravest person I've ever met, and any judge who can't see that is blind. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. Nathan echoed her words from Christmas morning. It means you do the right thing anyway. Grace laughed through tears. You're quoting me to myself? You were right the first time. Nathan smiled despite everything. Listen to me. Tomorrow you walk in there and you tell your truth. You show them who Oliver is, how happy and healthy and loved. And whatever happens, you don't face it alone. I know you said I make it worse, but I'm coming anyway. I'm going to sit in that courtroom and I'm going to make sure you know someone's on your side. Nathan. Her voice was so quiet he almost missed it. Why are you doing this? The question deserved honesty, even if honesty felt like standing naked in floodlights. Because I've spent 43 years prioritizing everything wrong. Because your son saw a stranger crying and decided to help with cookies and kindness. Because you invited me into your home when you had every reason not to. Because spending one morning with you both taught me more about what matters than 20 years of success ever did. His throat tightened. Because I'm falling in love with you and your son and the family you've built from wreckage. And even if you never speak to me again after tomorrow, I need you to know someone believes in you. Someone sees how extraordinary you are. Silence stretched so long Nathan thought she'd hung up. Then, I'm scared of how much I want to believe you. Believe me. Nathan pressed his palm against the cold window glass. I've lied in boardrooms and negotiations, but I've never lied to you. Not about anything that matters. They stayed on the phone until Grace's breathing evened and sleep pulled her voice into slower rhythms. Nathan listened to her breathe, this woman he barely knew and somehow understood better than anyone he'd spent years with. When he was sure she was asleep, he whispered into the darkness, I'll keep you safe tomorrow. Both of you. I promise. He hung up and stood at his window, watching Boston sleep beneath him. The city spread out in lights that represented millions of lives he'd never touch. Somewhere in those lights, Grace slept in her modest house with Oliver curled beside her, both of them vulnerable and brave, and trusting that tomorrow wouldn't break them completely. Nathan had built an empire thinking it meant something. Tomorrow he'd learn if one man's word could mean anything against systems designed to doubt and destroy. Tomorrow he'd discover whether showing up was enough, or if some damage once done stayed permanent. His phone buzzed once more. Grace's message read, Thank you for staying on the line, for not giving up, for whatever tomorrow brings. Nathan typed back, Whatever tomorrow brings, you don't face it alone. Then he set his phone down and began preparing for the most important testimony of his life. Not a merger or acquisition, not shareholders or profit margins, just truth offered to a family court judge, hoping it might be enough to prove that love could be simple as Christmas morning and strong as a mother protecting her child. Hoping that sometimes the broken people find each other not to be saved but to be seen. Hoping that showing up finally might count for something. The board meeting had happened 10 days earlier on January 10th, and Nathan could still feel the weight of Richard's challenge, the 3 votes that nearly cost him everything he'd built. But he'd survived by telling the truth about priorities, about choosing presence over profit. Patrick had pulled him aside afterward with simple advice, fix whatever's broken with her. The board situation would resolve itself. What mattered was showing up for Grace when she needed him most. Now January 20th dawned cold and clear, the kind of winter morning where sunlight off snow felt sharp enough to cut. Nathan dressed carefully, business formal but not ostentatious, conservative suit, understated tie, nothing that screamed wealth or privilege. He drove to the courthouse downtown and parked 3 blocks away, needing the walk to settle his nerves. The family court building was older than most downtown structures, its granite facade weathered and its interior dim with insufficient lighting. Nathan found the correct courtroom and slipped into the back row. Grace sat at the plaintiff's table with a tired-looking woman he assumed was her court-appointed attorney. Oliver wasn't visible. Children his age typically waited in separate rooms during hearings. Michael sat across the aisle with a lawyer in an expensive suit that made Grace's attorney's rumpled blazer look even more inadequate. Michael saw Nathan and his face twisted with something triumphant. He leaned to whisper to his lawyer, who glanced back and nodded. They'd been counting on Nathan showing up. This was exactly what they wanted. All rise. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmured conversations. Judge Sarah Martinez entered, a woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and an expression suggesting she'd seen every permutation of human failure parade through her courtroom. She took her seat and surveyed both parties with the weariness of someone who knew this case would be like hundreds of others except for the people whose lives hung in the balance. Mr. Harris, you've petitioned to modify custody arrangements with your son Oliver. Your grounds? Michael's lawyer stood, smooth and practiced. Your Honor, my client has made significant life changes since the original custody agreement. He's been sober for 18 months. He's gainfully employed at his family's business. He's engaged to be married to a school teacher who can provide stable home environment. Meanwhile, Ms. Morrison works excessive hours, is pursuing additional education that divides her attention, and has begun a relationship with an extremely wealthy man she barely knows. We have evidence this relationship began mere weeks ago, yet this man has already had unsupervised access to the minor child. The lawyer produced the tabloid photo, the documentation of Nathan's car on Grace's street Christmas morning. Judge Martinez studied the materials without expression. Ms. Morrison, your response. Grace's lawyer stood shakily. Your Honor, my client has maintained exemplary custody of Oliver for 2 years. She works hard to provide for him, yes, but she's never neglected his needs. Her education is to improve their circumstances. Regarding the relationship, Ms. Morrison showed Christmas hospitality to an acquaintance. There's nothing inappropriate about kindness during the holidays. An acquaintance worth $300 million who happens to have met Ms. Morrison's son in highly irregular circumstances. Michael's lawyer's tone dripped implication. We question her judgment in allowing such access. Michael took the stand first, his testimony practiced and sympathetic. He spoke about mistakes and growth, about finding sobriety and purpose, about wanting to be a real father to the son he'd abandoned. His fiancée Rebecca testified next, earnest and wholesome, describing the home they'd prepared with a bedroom already decorated for Oliver. They looked stable, traditional, exactly what family courts typically favored. Grace's testimony came after lunch. She took the stand with visible nerves, her hands trembling slightly as she swore the oath. Her lawyer walked her through the timeline of her marriage, Michael's abom, the separation and divorce. Grace's voice stayed steady, describing events Nathan knew must cost her to revisit. Then Michael's lawyer began cross-examination. Ms. Morrison, you work how many hours per week? It varies, 50 to 60 usually, and you're pursuing additional education? Yes, my nurse practitioner degree. Doesn't that suggest divided attention? Working full-time, studying and caring for a child? It suggests I'm trying to build a better future for my son, or that you're spreading yourself too thin. Michael's lawyer pulled out the photo. Tell us about Nathan Pierce. Grace's eyes found Nathan in the back row. He nodded once, trying to send strength through eye contact alone. He's someone I met on Christmas Eve, who was kind to Oliver, who I invited for Christmas breakfast. Someone you barely knew? Yes. Someone whose net worth you must have been aware of. I didn't know who he was until after Christmas. But once you knew, you continued the relationship? We're not in a relationship. Grace's voice firmed. He's a friend who's been supportive during a difficult time. A friend who's here today, Michael's lawyer gestured toward Nathan. A friend wealthy enough to solve all your financial problems? Isn't it true you've already accepted expensive gifts from Mr. Pierce? He brought toys for Oliver on Christmas. That's hardly a $500 toy dinosaur. Michael's lawyer had done his homework. Most single mothers would call that extraordinary generosity. Your Honor, we're simply establishing that Ms. Morrison's judgment regarding her son's exposure to strangers is questionable at best, particularly when those strangers represent potential financial gain. Grace's face went white. Nathan's hands clenched uselessly. The bailiff called his name 20 minutes later. Nathan Pierce to the stand. Nathan walked forward, feeling every eye track his movement. He swore the oath and sat, finding Grace's face in his peripheral vision. She looked terrified. Michael's lawyer approached with predatory satisfaction. Mr. Pierce, you're the CEO of Pierce Capital Management? Yes. Net worth estimated at $300 million. Closer to 280, but yes. And you met Ms. Morrison how? I was in Evergreen Park on Christmas Eve. Her son approached me. We talked briefly. She invited me to join them for Christmas breakfast the next day. After knowing you how long? About 30 minutes. Doesn't that strike you as unusual? A single mother inviting a strange man to her home after half an hour? It struck me as extraordinarily kind. Nathan kept his voice even. I was having a difficult day. Her son saw that and wanted to help. That's the kind of child she's raising. Compassionate and brave. Or naive, trusting strangers without appropriate caution. Oliver's instincts were correct. I wasn't a threat to him or his mother, but she couldn't have known that. Michael's lawyer paced. Tell us, Mr. Pierce, are you romantically involved with Ms. Morrison? Nathan's eyes met Grace's. This was the moment. Truth or careful evasion? Yes, I am. Grace's face showed something between shock and resignation. After knowing her, how long? 4 weeks. And you've given her expensive gifts? I brought some toys and groceries for Christmas. Hardly extravagant. A $500 dinosaur toy? I didn't know what it cost. I asked my assistant to find the best one available. Nathan leaned forward. Listen, I understand what you're implying, that Grace is using me for money, that she's making poor decisions because of financial desperation. But you have it exactly backward. Grace has rejected every offer of help I've made. She wouldn't let me pay for a lawyer, wouldn't let me help with bills or school expenses. She's proud and independent and determined to handle things herself. How touching. Michael's lawyer's voice dripped sarcasm. But it doesn't address the fundamental question. Did Ms. Morrison exercise good judgment in allowing you near her son? Better judgment than Michael exercised when he hit her while she was pregnant. Nathan's voice went cold. Better judgment than signing away his parental rights because child support was inconvenient. Better judgment than showing up drunk on Christmas to terrorize a 6-year-old he hadn't seen in months. Objection, inflammatory and irrelevant. Your Honor, I'm simply pointing out that we're questioning Grace's judgment while ignoring Michael's documented history of violence and abandonment. Nathan turned back to the lawyer. You want to know if I'm qualified to be around Oliver? I'm not his father and I'm not trying to be, but I know what it's like to have a parent who's never there. My father was exactly like I became, work-obsessed, emotionally absent, convinced success meant something. I grew up rich and lonely in a house full of staff who weren't family. Oliver has a mother who's present, who sacrifices everything for him, who loves him enough to work herself to exhaustion. That's what matters, not which parent has more money or a fiance or a bigger house. Being there, Grace is there. The courtroom went silent. Judge Martinez studied Nathan for a long moment. Mr. Pierce, do you have children of your own? No, Your Honor, Nathan's voice caught. I wanted them. My ex-wife wanted them desperately. But I kept saying later after the next deal, when work settled down. Work never settled down. Now I'm 43, divorced, childless. I have money and success and an empty life. His throat tightened. Then I met a woman who works 3 jobs and raises her son alone and somehow finds time to study and bake cookies for neighbors. And her 6-year-old son, who's so empathetic, he offers his mother to someone in pain. They reminded me what actually matters. Not quarterly earnings, but showing up. Being present. I've lived the consequences of choosing wrong. I don't want Oliver to live them too. Thank you, Mr. Pierce. You may step down. Oliver was brought in next for Chambers' testimony, just him and the judge and the lawyers. Nathan couldn't hear what was said, but he watched Grace's face cycle through fear and hope and terror. 20 minutes later, everyone returned and Judge Martinez arranged papers on her bench. I've reviewed all evidence and testimony. She looked first at Michael. Mr. Harris, I appreciate that you've made changes in your life. Sobriety is commendable. However, actions speak louder than assertions. You surrendered your parental rights voluntarily, then changed your mind when you learned your ex-wife had met someone with resources. That suggests opportunism rather than genuine paternal interest. Michael's face darkened, but he stayed silent. Ms. Morrison, the judge turned to Grace. You work hard, perhaps too hard. You're pursuing education that divides your attention. You did show questionable judgment in inviting a stranger to your home after brief acquaintance. However, your son is healthy, happy, thriving. Every report indicates excellent care. And your ex-husband's primary evidence of poor judgment is that you showed Christmas hospitality and developed a relationship with a successful man who treats you and your son with respect. The judge paused. This court has seen actual poor judgment, substance abuse around children, revolving door of romantic partners, neglect and endangerment. Mr. Pierce's involvement doesn't rise to any concerning level. The ruling is as follows. Full custody remains with Ms. Morrison. Mr. Harris, you're granted supervised visitation, 2 hours twice monthly. You'll complete court-ordered counseling. In 6 months, we'll review your compliance. Until then, contact remains supervised only. She brought her gavel down. This court is adjourned. Grace collapsed into her lawyer's arms, sobbing. Michael stood abruptly, his chair scraping loud. This is bullshit. Mr. Harris! Judge Martinez's voice cracked like a whip. One more word and you'll be held in contempt. Michael's lawyer pulled him toward the exit. Nathan stayed in his seat watching Grace cry, wanting to go to her but uncertain if his presence would help or hurt. Oliver appeared from the back room and ran to his mother. They clung to each other in the middle of the courtroom, both crying, a small island of relief in the formal space. Nathan slipped out into the hallway, giving them privacy. He leaned against the cold granite wall and let his own tears come. They'd won. Grace would keep Oliver, and Nathan had testified publicly about falling in love, had exposed his entire empty life to scrutiny, had risked everything on honesty. The courtroom door opened, and Oliver's voice carried through. "Where's Mr. Nathan?" Nathan straightened. Grace appeared with Oliver's hand in hers. Oliver saw him and broke free, running to throw himself at Nathan's legs. "We won! We get to stay together!" Nathan lifted Oliver. "I knew you would, buddy. Your mom's pretty amazing. So are you." Oliver hugged Nathan's neck tight. Grace approached more slowly. "Thank you." The words came out barely audible. "For testifying. For telling the truth." Nathan set Oliver down gently. "Can I talk to your mom alone for 1 minute?" Grace's hands shook as she faced him. "You said in court we're romantically involved. You said you're in love with me." "I am in love with you." Nathan's voice was steady, present tense, fully committed. "We've known each other 4 weeks. I don't care about timelines. I care that you're the first person in years who's made me want to be better. 4 weeks or 4 years, that doesn't change what I feel." Grace pressed her hands to her face. "I'm terrified of needing you, of Oliver getting attached and you leaving." "It's real." Nathan took her hands. "I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I can promise I'll show up every day for you and Oliver, if you'll let me. I don't know how to do this, how to trust. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together." Oliver ran back. "Can we get ice cream?" "We won, so we should celebrate." They got ice cream at a shop 3 blocks from the courthouse, squeezed into a booth meant for 2. Oliver ordered triple scoop and talked nonstop. Grace and Nathan sat shoulder to shoulder, exhausted and relieved, occasionally meeting each other's eyes with small smiles that felt like promises. When they finally emerged into late afternoon cold, Oliver skipped ahead, leaving footprints in fresh snow. Grace caught Nathan's hand. "No regrets?" "Not one." Nathan pulled her close. "Not about any of it." Oliver turned back. "Come on, I want to build a snowman when we get home." "Home." The words settled into Nathan's chest, warm and permanent. Grace's modest house where he'd spent more nights than his own penthouse lately. Where Oliver's dinosaurs lived on every surface and coffee tasted better and mornings felt like reasons to wake up. "Yes, wherever you're going, I'm coming." They drove through streets turned white, past houses lit warm against the cold. Oliver fell asleep before they reached home, his head tilted against the car seat, Valentine candy scattered in his lap. Grace reached back to adjust his blanket, the new bracelet catching light from passing street lamps. In the days that followed, life settled into new rhythms. Nathan's clothes appearing in Grace's closet, Oliver's dinosaurs migrating to Nathan's penthouse. Small domesticities that felt like permanence. 3 weeks later, Valentine's Day fell on a Saturday. Nathan picked up Grace and Oliver mid-morning, driving them to Evergreen Park under threatening skies. Snow had been falling since dawn, the same kind of soft, persistent snow that had fallen the night they met. The bench where everything changed sat empty, waiting. "Remember this place?" Nathan led them there. "This is where we found you. When you were sad, I was very sad, until you offered me cookies." He pulled out 2 bracelets. "One for you, one for Oliver. A promise that I'll keep showing up." "Like a stepdad?" Oliver's voice was hopeful. "Eventually, maybe. For now, just someone who loves you both." "Yes!" Oliver threw his arms around Nathan's neck. Grace fastened her bracelet, eyes wet. "You really mean this?" "Every word. I spent 43 years building the wrong things. I'm not making that mistake again." Snow fell heavier now, turning the world soft and white. Oliver ran toward the Christmas tree at the park's center, still decorated despite the season, his red coat bright against the snow. Grace and Nathan stayed on the bench, fingers intertwined. Movement caught Nathan's eye. Another bench 50 feet away, another man sitting alone, head in hands. The posture was unmistakable. Grief, loneliness, the kind of pain Nathan recognized because he'd worn it like a second skin 2 months ago. All Oliver saw it too. "Should we help him?" Grace looked at Nathan, a question in her eyes. He nodded. They approached together, a small delegation of the formerly broken. Oliver reached the man first. "Mister, are you okay?" The man looked up, startled, middle-aged with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm fine, kid, just having a rough day." Oliver pulled a Valentine candy heart from his pocket, already melting slightly. "These help when you're sad." The man took it, his hand shaking. "That's very kind of you." Grace knelt beside her son. "Bad days don't last forever. I know it doesn't feel like that right now, but things change. People show up when you least expect it." The man's eyes moved between them. This woman, this child, this well-dressed man standing behind them. Something like recognition crossed his face, as if he saw not just strangers but proof that what Grace said might be true. "Thank you," his voice cracked. "All of you. Thank you." They left him there with the candy heart and walked back through snow that now fell thick enough to obscure distant trees. Oliver ran ahead making snow angels, his laughter carrying clear through the cold air. Grace leaned her head on Nathan's shoulder. "You changed my life," Nathan whispered. "Both of you. I was dying before I met you. Just didn't know it yet. We saved each other." Grace's fingers tightened on his. "That's how it works. Nobody saves anyone alone." The park around them filled with other families, couples celebrating Valentine's Day with the people they loved. Nathan looked at Grace and Oliver and felt something settle into place deeper than relief, more permanent than happiness. This was what he'd been searching for in all those years of deals and mergers and empty victories. Not success or wealth or professional respect. Just this. Two people who saw him clearly and chose him anyway. A child who offered cookies to strangers and a mother brave enough to trust again. Oliver ran back breathless. "Can we stay longer? Please?" "Little longer." Grace checked her watch, then home for hot chocolate. Nathan pulled them both close, one arm around Grace and one around Oliver, standing in the falling snow while the city moved around them. The bench behind them sat empty again, waiting patient for the next Christmas Eve, the next person who needed reminding that sitting alone was only ever temporary. That kindness from strangers could remake everything. That sometimes the best families weren't born, but chosen on cold nights by people brave enough to offer cookies, and braver still to accept them. "You know what I realized?" Nathan's voice was quiet, meant only for Grace. "That night on this bench, I thought I'd lost everything. My marriage, my chance at family, any possibility of happiness. But you hadn't." Grace looked up at him. "No, I was exactly where I needed to be, right here, waiting for a 6-year-old boy to see a stranger crying and decide to help." Nathan kissed her forehead. Everything that mattered started here. They stayed until Oliver's teeth chattered and Grace's nose turned red and Nathan's fingers went numb even in gloves. Then they walked through snow-covered paths toward Nathan's car, toward home and ordinary evening plans, toward a future none of them could have imagined 2 months ago, but all of them had chosen. Oliver climbed into his car seat chattering about Valentine's Day and snow angels and whether they could get a puppy. Grace slid into the passenger seat and Nathan started the engine, letting it warm while snow accumulated on the windshield. Through the white blur, he could just make out the bench where everything changed, could see the man they'd helped still sitting there, candy heart clutched in his hand like a talisman. "You think he'll be okay?" Grace followed Nathan's gaze. "I think someone saw him, someone offered kindness. That's how it starts." Nathan put the car in gear. One small gesture from a stranger and everything can change. Like cookies on Christmas Eve. Exactly like cookies on Christmas Eve. They drove through streets turned white and quiet, past houses lit warm against the cold, past families visible through windows celebrating the day in their own ways. Oliver fell asleep before they reached Grace's street, his head tilted against the car seat, Valentine candy hearts scattered in his lap. Grace reached back to adjust his blanket, her bracelet catching light from passing street lamps. Nathan pulled into Grace's driveway and killed the engine. For a moment, they sat in silence, listening to Oliver's soft breathing and the tick of cooling metal. The house waited for them, modest and warm, lights on in the windows Grace had left burning. "Home. I love you." Nathan said it simply, without drama, just stating fact. "Both of you. More than I knew I could love anything." Grace turned to face him fully, her eyes serious. I'm still scared of this being too good, of something going wrong. Things will go wrong. Nathan touched her face gently. We'll fight. I'll work too much sometimes. You'll doubt me. Life isn't perfect. But we'll show up anyway, that's the promise. Not perfection, just presence. Grace leaned across the console to kiss him, soft and sure, a kiss that tasted like promise and beginning, and the kind of love that grew from broken pieces fitted carefully together. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. Let's go inside. Oliver will wake up cranky if we leave him in the car. They gathered sleeping child and Valentine candy and shopping bags, carrying everything into the house where warmth hit them like embrace. Nathan set Oliver on the couch while Grace started hot chocolate. The ordinary domesticity of it still surprised him sometimes. This life he had stumbled into, this family he had found when he stopped looking. Oliver stirred, blinking awake. Are we home? We're home, Nathan confirmed. All of us? Nathan looked at Grace in the kitchen, at Oliver on the couch, at the house full of dinosaurs and crayon drawings, and love. Yes, buddy, all of us. Outside, snow continued falling, covering Evergreen Park and the bench where strangers became family, where kindness had remade 3 broken lives into something whole. The man they'd helped was gone now, walking toward whatever came next, candy heart in pocket and the memory of a 6-year-old's compassion warming something frozen inside him. The bench sat empty in the falling snow, waiting patient for the next Christmas Eve, the next crying stranger, the next small miracle beginning with 3 words. Mister, why are you sad? But in Grace's living room, Nathan wasn't thinking about strangers or benches or Christmas Eve 2 months ago. He was watching Oliver demonstrate his new dinosaur knowledge while Grace made hot chocolate that would be too sweet and perfect. He was living in this moment, present and grateful, and finally understanding what his father never had. That success wasn't measured in dollars or deals. That the truest wealth was exactly this: a child's laughter, a woman's smile, the ordinary miracle of being chosen by people who saw you clearly and loved you anyway. Mr. Nathan? Oliver's voice pulled him back. You're not sad anymore, right? Nathan pulled Oliver close, reaching for Grace, who joined them on the pyramid, the 3 of them fitting together like they'd been designed this way all along. No, buddy, I'm not sad anymore. Not even a little bit. Good. Oliver snuggled into Nathan's side. Because if you get sad again, you can always borrow my mom. I know. Nathan's voice caught, thick with emotion he no longer tried to hide. Best offer I ever got. Outside, the snow fell and the world turned white and quiet. Inside a house on Maple Street, a family that hadn't existed 2 months ago sat together drinking too sweet hot chocolate and planning tomorrow and the day after that and all the days that would come. Not perfect days, not easy days, but days lived together, present and accounted for, showing up for each other in all the ways that mattered. That was enough. That was everything.